Thank you for watching the Housing Oregon YouTube channel. Be sure to join our network and get involved in the work that we are doing. If you can, please like and subscribe. It helps us build this channel, which serves as a platform to communicate with our members. This video is part of our 2025 annual conference. We're looking for folks to be on the conference planning committee. Please email info@housingoregon.org.
Morning at 9. Not sure if everybody agrees with me, but yeah, that registration scene, that was something, huh? Still feel like I'm recovering a little bit. Okay, well, thanks so much for joining us so early on a Monday. My name is Wendy Kelfkin. I am the, what do I do? Oh, commercial and multifamily team leader for I gotta get my brain going here, people. I have not had coffee for the Portland Clean Energy Fund. And I am really excited to see you. This is a topic that I've been giving a lot of thought to and that we encounter in PCEF all the time because our funding is for very specific things. And I know that affordable housing developers are often trying to fill gaps. And so they're trying to plug in our funding with where they need it. And there's always kind of like a rub there. So we're going to get into that today. We're going to start by meeting the panel. I'm going to have each of the panelists introduce themselves. We'll talk a little bit about housing supply and demand. So this is like setting the scene. What does supply look like? What does demand look like right now? And then I've invited some good friends and colleagues here to bring you their perspective from the contractors to certifiers and modelers to quality assurance providers on this rub that we have between how do we get units, lots of units, really fast, and how do we keep them really high quality. Okay, so starting off, I'm going to invite Tanya, who's our first speaker, to introduce herself.
Is this thing on?
Yeah.
Good morning, everyone. Hopefully you can hear me. I'm Tanya Wolfersberger, she, her pronouns. I support the Development and Construction Services team at the Portland Housing Bureau. I have worked in the affordable housing industry for probably about 20 years. I had the good folks at Network for Oregon Affordable Housing give me my first break as a loan servicer way back in the last century, and have been kind of working in various capacities since then. And I just want to kind of set the stage a little bit, as Wendy said, for talking about a little bit about housing supply, mostly about demand. In Portland, so I apologize to folks who aren't from Portland. My information is very Portland focused, but I hope that it will resonate with you all, and that you'll see some similarities in your communities as housing demand and need is a statewide issue. So I'm going to go over some information from the housing needs analysis and housing.
Oh, hold up 1 second. Let's do
production strategy.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Let's
I got my
get through intros really fast.
Oh.
Yep. So,
You want me to go?
okay.
Good morning. I'm Afton with Walsh Construction. So we're a general contractor based here in Portland, but we really serve the entire Northwest. So the state of Washington, the state of Oregon, kind of all four corners, if you will. And we predominantly build affordable housing in those regions, throughout this region. I've been with Walsh for 18 years. Started in the field as an assistant superintendent. I'm now a project manager, and I also do all of our community development, community engagement around MWSB contracting, workforce diversity, and just sort of a lot of our community-based projects are where I tend to focus my efforts. So I'll be here today just to kind of lend what we see on the contractor side, and hopefully it can provide some added color to the conversation. Nice to be here.
Hello, everyone. Before we get started here, because I do not do caffeine, but I need energy, so if everyone could step up for just a split second here just to get some energy into everybody. Let's move up. This is going to be a long conference here. We want to start it off with some energy here. So if we could just do a little bit of we're not doing anything too, not sweaty or anything like that, but if we just get like the arms up for a second here, move them around. Okay. All right. That's enough. Okay. All right. I'm known as the gadget guy. I'm also going to be known as something different later on based on a prop I brought. So I will be checking to see what the CO2 levels are. Our conversation will be very endearing and enlightening, but if there is a little bit of yawning happening, that's because we're just bringing this space up with a lot of CO2. My name is Eric Foley, Associate Director of Certifications, Earth Advantage, Portland-based nonprofit. I'm proud and honored to be here, and I've been working for 20 years in the industry. 14 of those have been at Earth Advantage, and I oversee green building certification services for single-family and multifamily housing, both on a local and also on a regional basis with independent raters that are in 5 states on the West Coast.
Hi, and I'm John Glantz. I'm with Evergreen Energy Partners, and I am a field specialist and serve a number of different roles here today. I'm representing PCEF as a quality assurance provider for the commercial and multifamily programs. My background, I was a contractor, became an inspector in 2007, jumped on, got my BPI certification, and got into the energy efficiency industry there. And from there, I've been involved with indoor air quality, construction, and energy efficiency improvements. I'm here today working with this program and excited to be here.
Okay. Hi again. Hopefully you can still hear me. I will try to project. Before we get to the good stuff, which I think you're all here mostly to hear about, like I mentioned before, I'm going to kind of try to set the table a little bit, talk about housing demand, and the importance of why we need to move forward as quickly and as efficiently as possible. So based on the housing needs analysis and a housing production strategy that was recently adopted by City Council, we have a forecast of what our housing need will be in the Portland area up through 2045. And as you can see by this data on this slide, we're going to need up to 120,000 or a little bit more of new homes in the next 20 years. And that's across all different income levels and housing typologies as well. So in order to kind of keep up on our current makeup of income diversity and account for our historic underproduction of housing, particularly for extremely low-income households, Portland is going to have its hands full, and the housing needs analysis is estimating that at least 53% of all new housing that will be needed will need to be affordable for households at 80% area median income or below. So we've got our work cut out for us here. To meet that projected need, Portland will need to produce 5,000 to 6,000 homes every year. And to just give you a little context of that production, during 2020 to 2024, the city produced an average of 3,860 units per year. So we are kind of under pace to meet the forecast of what we need. So along with the kind of the needs that are outlined here, the housing needs analysis also looked at what can Portlanders afford. So this slide here has income levels, rents, and mortgages that folks in Portland can afford based on a 3-person household. The data is from the 2024 HUD data for area median income for Portland metro area. And I think what this slide represents for me and highlights and kind of reinforces is that the needs expressed on the previous slide of the amount of housing that we need, and that a kind of a particular focus on the challenge and the need that is ahead of us, especially to provide housing for extremely low and low income households. And it also kind of starts to indicate what's the level of subsidy that we're going to need in order to get to those numbers. So the question is, do we have enough land to meet the housing need in addition to the subsidy that will be required? I think the partially good news in a deck of lots of challenges that I'm presenting is that it appears that Portland does have the capacity to meet our needs. In fact, we have some surplus capacity throughout all the different geographic regions of the city. That's expressed here on this slide. Of the need that I showed in the beginning of 120,000 units over the next 20 years, we nearly have twice that capacity throughout all the areas of Portland. Now, that doesn't go into the details of the challenges that we'll need to produce different kinds of housing for all the different varieties of household types and income levels, all the different needs that individuals and families will need in their housing going forward. It also doesn't address kind of what we need to do in our goals and values to ensure that the housing that we do develop furthers fair housing, it increases access to opportunity areas, and it doesn't exacerbate displacement. So we're not putting pressure on areas where there's highly vulnerable communities. I think, what all of this indicates and what we talked about is a kind of an obvious need is funding, right? But how else does the city impact development and that supply that we're going to need to get to? So there's many ways that the city can influence housing development. I think, the primary way is funding, and that is the primary role that the Portland Housing Bureau plays within the city of Portland. PHB subsidizes or gives direct subsidy to the development of affordable housing at 60% area median income or below, mostly for rental housing in that area. We've been averaging about $150,000 per unit in subsidy for that new construction development. We also have had the extreme fortune to have 2 general obligation bonds that we can utilize to produce housing in the city of Portland. The Portland Housing Bond and the Metro Regional Housing Bond. Unfortunately, those resources have all been committed. And we are also in between tax increment financing districts. We have about 7 new districts that will be coming online, but those districts won't generate anything kind of substantial enough to produce housing for probably 6 to 10 years. So we are going to be relying and need local funding, other local funding sources. We've been fortunate enough to partner with Portland Clean Energy Fund as one of those local sources. We will continue to pass through the limited amount of federal dollars that we receive, and hopefully we'll continue to receive, and then we'll be working to generate new local resources to meet the growing need of housing. And that is just kind of PHB's primary role. The city also provides other incentives and financing. We provide down payment assistance for homeownership units, tax exemptions, SDC waivers. There's other financing available through Prosper Portland that's kind of serving that 80 to 120% AMI range. And then, of course, we have a series of development codes and other requirements that apply to all different types of housing. So within that context, I'm hoping that you will hear from my co-panelists like how these projects and how we're going to address this need successfully and implement the housing's production goals and our goals and values towards meeting the housing needs of our communities, and that we're going to be able to do that in a fast, cost-effective, but also sustainable and resilient manner. So I'm going to hand that back over to Wendy to further us along. Thank you.
Hello. Okay. Can you?
Sorry, I also have some resources. I'm assuming you all get a copy of this slide or have access to it if you want to read further about the housing needs analysis and the housing production strategy. There's also a link to the state's information website where you can find links to other jurisdictions who also produce this kind of information. And I will pass that down.
Thank you so much, Tanya. So the scene is set. We've got our work cut out for us, don't we? Getting together with this panel and starting to think about this topic, we we laid out a series of challenges that we see in getting to the numbers and getting to the level of quality that we want to see in the housing that is going to be developed. And so I'm going to read through these challenges, and then you're going to hear each of the speakers after me talk about their perspective on those challenges. And then we came up with strategies about and ways in which we're all part of like the supply chain that delivers housing. How can we all work together a little bit better? How can we collaborate and coordinate a little bit better to create the speed and the quality combination that we're looking for? So challenges that we see in affordable housing development: competing priorities. You have, and each one of the panelists will talk about this is the priority that I bring when I come to the table as a contractor, as a certifier, as a funder. And you have many, many different funders, and they all have different priorities. They're all looking for different things. Portland Clean Energy Fund, at its core, it's a greenhouse gas saving program, and so we have to invest in things that are going to equal GHGs. But there's a whole host of things that need to be done in order to enable those measures. And so we've been able to free up some of our funding so that we can do, in retrofit scenarios at least, provide up to 30% for life, health, safety, and enabling measures that come along with energy efficiency. And that's not something that you see in a lot of energy efficiency funding. Escalating costs. We all know which way costs are going. They're going rapidly a certain direction right now. There are, for us as funders, we've created, we've awarded grants. Oh. You don't need to hear two of me. Maybe, can you turn that one off?
Ghost in the room.
Or I can. It's always right when the AV people step out of the room. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. I'm going to turn this one off. Use this one. Okay. Am I still echoing? Okay. You know what? Can everyone hear me? Awesome.
There we go.
All right.
So loud.
Escalated costs. We know what's happening with costs. Code and neighborhood requirements. That creates a layer of complexity. Funding inconsistency. This is something that actually the panelists have been able to educate me a little bit more on. That funders need to, be able to bring money to the table at a predictable cadence. And that the rules and the amounts need to be well known and well understood and
just because the funding came through. So kind of balancing the timing of the funding. So the big strategies I'll talk about, I'm sure many of you, I apologize. At Walsh, we have this term, it's cost-efficient design and construction. I'll just skip through the high-level principles because I know you've heard it ad nauseum. And then thinking about high-performance enclosures. So that's really the big thing that we think about when we think about energy efficiency is, yes, there are new technologies and great mechanical systems and all of this stuff, but if your envelope leaks, it kind of doesn't matter how great your mechanical systems are. You're just going to be, losing it all out the holes in your building. So we spent a lot of time thinking about that, and it's relatively low cost. If you were to think about kind of the break even on really really tight envelopes is generally low cost compared to really high mechanical systems. Break even is pretty short. And then early coordination to balance those priorities like I talked about. So really quickly, our idea of CEDC is to really think about, okay, all the different components in construction. You've got your mechanical, your electrical, your framing, structural, all the finishes. Try to kind of squeeze as much as you can out of that by just being really efficient and build the same kitchen layout for your 100 units. Don't have 15 different kitchen layouts. Little things like that. We try to build on modules that your walls are a single, 5 pieces of drywall across, not 5 3/4 pieces of drywall, so that you don't have to waste a lot of energy cutting. Those types of things. So it's minimizing waste, being really efficient in your floor plan, sort of this building blocks. Just a kind of kit of parts. And then what you can do is you keep your core and really similar, and then you can oscillate your exteriors. You can add decks. You can do all these things that might on the outside, where you've kept kind of your building blocks and your kit of parts the same. And then density definitely plays a big role. So this is a project example that was a very efficient building, relatively low cost not because we skimped on durability or quality or energy efficiency, but because we just built really smartly with a lot of upfront coordination and planning. So that's kind of the CEDC, just being efficient with how you think about the building blocks of the building. And then high performance enclosures. Water tightness, obviously we live in a place that rains, so if you're thinking about your long-term operating costs, we want buildings that don't leak so that you don't have to spend money to fix them. Energy efficiency, lower utility costs, air tightness, just overall durability. I liked this example, there's been so much evolution over the last 30 years. So those are the drawings that we used to get in like the 90s. There's nothing about an air barrier. There's not even waterproofing layers drawn. And so contractors used to kind of make it up in the field with quote unquote maybe best practices. But now we spend a lot of time up front really thinking about where is our air barrier, where are waterproofing layers, where's our vapor barriers, and understanding just the building science about how buildings breathe or don't breathe is really critical. What happens if water does get in, how can it get out, that type of thing. So I just thought that was interesting to show that there's been a lot of evolution in building science envelopes. And so what that looks like, this is one filled with an insulation, which I'm sure Eric inspected all the framing at the corners and everything at one point to make sure it's perfect. So we now, a lot of our projects will take and do thermal imaging to say, hey, are there any holes? Where are they? And I like this example. I mean, that's a very, very tight, efficient building that isn't losing, dollars out the window or out the vents, something like that. I should have had a picture of one from the 1990s and what that looked like. Also, why retrofit? Our preservation dollars are very valuable because we can do a lot in the envelope on our preservation projects. So finally, I'll just talk about early coordination. I think this is a project called the Bury Building, which we did with Northwest Housing Alternatives several years ago. And we've actually talked about this project on many panels kind of over the years. I think last year maybe at Housing Oregon, but it was a really amazing project because we implemented that CEDC principles. We had really early coordination, and the team kind of came up with what are the goals of the project. And they sat down. They had like a manifesto. They And then they revisited them at, at every, quarterly pace or so. Okay, are all the decisions that we're making gonna achieve and meet these goals? And so being on the same page, knowing that you're kind of all driving in the same direction is really important, and then reinforcing those. And they were really adhered to vigorously. I think it was, someone would maybe come into have an idea like, oh, well, maybe we should do this, or they're like, well, does that meet one of the stated goals of this project? And it's like, well, no, I guess it doesn't. It's like, okay, great idea, but like, that's not the right thing for this particular project. And then that early funding coordination. So as an example, I just wanted to kind of hit home on the early coordination. So this is a project we did up in Seattle. So you can see a lot of use of solar. And they spent 6 months or more in advance of this project even breaking ground to knowing they were going to have solar, to make sure that they could use that roof space as efficiently as possible. So they actually did all this modeling of the mechanical work, ductwork, to ensure that the ductwork was underneath the roof, not on top of the roof. So that's what all the ductwork looked. So you could have a project like that, that's the neighboring building, and all the ductwork is on top of the roof. So there's not a lot of space for solar. Here, we spent a lot of time modeling, thinking about it, going slow to go fast, that's a term that we like to use. And we're able to have a project that again, a roof that looked like that instead. So I think that's one of the most important things that we see from a contractor perspective, is that funding that might come in for really noble, great things like solar or different types of mechanical, if it doesn't come into the project at the right time, it's really not very helpful. And things can cost so much more. So let's say we designed the project like that because we didn't know solar, and then maybe we're just in framing, but suddenly, oh, we got to get solar in a building. Oh, shit. So now we have to go back, and then we have to do the modeling once we're already framing. Then we're reframing things. We're probably paying our mechanical engineers to now redesign the building twice. And so maybe we still end up getting to a roof that looks like that, but it's going to cost us twice to do that. So I think, to me, that's one of the most important things. And oftentimes we have this huge housing need, so we're trying to get units out there really quick, but maybe we pause or take a slow it down for 3 to 6 months to let the funding, know if the funding is going to actually come in before we then continue into design, because then we know exactly what are those clear objectives, what are the goals we're trying to, because if the goals change halfway through, it's going to be more expensive, just guaranteed. You can minimize it, but it will be. So I think those are my biggest takeaways as we think about how to really utilize our efficient resources to meet this big need. And with that, a really amazing tool to help us do that is Eric.
I have a tendency to sometimes talk about stuff because there's so much information to share. So I'm just going to see if I can keep track of these things and stay on point. So Earth Advantage. So we're a local nonprofit, and our mission is create an informed and humane real estate market. Our work includes climate friendly housing, data solutions, workforce training, and climate justice. And we're here to talk about, at least my focus today is on some elements that can help you make more informed decisions. So we have this unhoused individual and affordable housing residents that are often the most vulnerable to climate disasters and economic shocks, and resiliency is protection today, stability tomorrow, and less financial burden over time. So that starts with quality, and that's going to be a theme that I'm going to be talking about, but I'm going to be talking about quality in the aspect of time. Timing is important. I'm also going to be now known as the fork guy because I'm going to use an example of 2 forks. So when given the option between a plastic fork and a metal fork, most of us recognize that between this one is quality, reliability, and performance. So we know this one's going to be that more durable, performance-driven type of choice. But if you have a really skilled salesperson, you could believe that you're getting this when you actually have this. So really having a trusted advisor to help you with that understanding, that translates to the housing market. That's why we have to have trusted advisors at every phase of the process: design, construction, verification, and completion. And one of those things that helps you understand what you're getting is information. And information is possible through modeling and certification, and those involvements and verifiers getting involved early on in the process. And the things that Wendy had shared and Afton had shared as well is that oftentimes modelers, certifying bodies, verifiers, we're involved after the design is baked. And then you say, well, we've got this certification, we've got this checklist that we have to do. Let's get you involved so that we can get this thing taken care of, we can get some funding, we can check that box. But by that time, your design has gone through the iteratives that those changes are going to be cost prohibitive versus cost valuable. So in the modeling sense of the world, if we're involved early on in that, to do shoebox modeling or other types of modeling, we can make the most impact to your project. If we're involved at the phase of CDs or beyond, that's when that value proposition disappears. Those changes are more cost prohibitive, and you can't get that cost savings that you're trying to aspire to. That time has kind of elapsed in that sense. And then we've lost out possibly on the quality area as well. And we've got a spectrum here, energy efficiency and beyond. We started with energy efficiency many years ago, and that was hammered home, but now we're working on resiliency, and we're thinking about the embodied carbon of buildings and how we can be more positive in those things. So we're moving from this consumptive-based society to regenerative. We only have so many resources available today. And it's a balancing act, something that defies the logic. We're defying gravity. And I know that there's a lot of things that you are working through this paradox: low cost, saving time, and quality. All those things are pulling at one another. So you have to anchor on something, usually two of those elements, in order to ensure that you can achieve that outcome. Well, my comment to you today is that you don't necessarily need to give up the cost piece where it's too cost prohibitive if you're focusing on quality and time, if you do the things in the right order and you get the right people at the table. You change your perspective about this. Is this person looking at you straight, or are they looking to the side? Look at it a couple different ways. We need to change the way that we think about how we do the stuff we do. A lot of folks, we know we have a process. A lot of you are very experienced. You've been in the industry for a long time. We've got a way that we do stuff. Sometimes if we shift that perspective just a little bit, we can make a bigger impact in the overall outcome of what we're trying to achieve. Now, modeling involves various stages of the process. There are elements that we have where we're just looking at specific systems, or we're looking at the whole market or the whole element itself. And those include shoebox modeling, we're very simplified, to looking at load calculations, to looking at optimizing systems, or something that's called value engineering, but I would think about it as life cycle benefit analysis as opposed to cost analysis, or other areas where we're really trying to narrow in on that performance of that building and make more informed decisions. Those modeling can include efficiencies, like what Afton was talking about with the mechanical systems. Where do we put those types of systems in order to make the outcome that we're trying to achieve, which puts renewables on the roof? Some tools available to you today, some of you have seen this, some of you may not have, and this is something that's from statewide. The Zero tool, you can go online, it's free, you can put in your address, you can put in some performance metrics that you're trying to achieve. It will spit out an EUI, an energy use intensity value. Just start the process of thinking about what you're trying to achieve on some of those metrics. And then you get parties involved that are out there. I know there's a couple of quality assurance parties in the audience today that will help you with kind of focusing in on those areas, like window wall ratio. If you have more windows for daylighting, obviously there's value there, but it also has some costs, higher heating and cooling loads. And I know that there's still that element of time and cost that you're still balancing. And you also have these competing priorities. We've got all these different parties that we're trying to appease. We've got these constraints, competition, expectations, perceptions. All these things are competing one another. Don't forget that one element, that missing piece there. Quality still needs to matter. And we need to focus on that piece of quality. In order to do so, we need to engage parties early and often that have the skills and abilities to help inform you and your team on making informed decisions. That integrative approach involving the design, the construction, the operations, those modeling parties, the verifiers. Our involvement early in that process can really help you make more informed and better decisions. That starts with certifications. So don't think about certifications as a checklist, but think about it as a compass and a map to get you through this process with better built performance. We work on goals, green standards, quality, and plotting that path forward. Certifications are a way to open up some of those financial needs for debt, equity, incentives, and tax credits. Those are ways to get you through that process that you're challenged with. And I know those resources are limited, but we make better informed decisions by being involved sooner and frequently. These are just a couple things that certifications have provided as benefits. There are many more. And in our process at Earth Advantage, we've been working on this for about 30 years. We have this kind of process that involves throughout the integrative elements of early design through construction, optimization, verification, and then the final delivery of your product. So we want to make certain that steps along the way there, we're here to help you get to those outcomes that you're trying to achieve. I know that there's still that cost-benefit analysis you're thinking in the back of your head. Well, is this going to be cost-effective? Is this going to be achievable? And I'm here to say, yes, if you get involved with us sooner than later, we will be able to not run out of time to help ensure that you're getting the best of your money and your investments. Now remember, some things you can start today. Passive designs, there's an order that we talk about. Passive first, then active, then renewables. If you follow that order of design, you're going to have better outcomes in the designs in production that you're trying to achieve. So you think about those passive designs first. I mean, nature is a great party, the biomimicry, thinking about how those elements of passive designs and how ants cool their spaces. We've learned some of these techniques from nature. We're putting them into our own built environments. Those things are really great things to be able to use. They've worked over thousands of years. We should take a note of those elements and continue to work on those fronts. This is a video. I'm not going to play it today, but it's a kind of a cool little thing that talks about the integrative process of all these different parties and how that can help make an informed decision. There's a YouTube party on there. You can look it up at another point in time. Just keep on moving along, and hopefully it won't play. All right. For the energy modeling life cycle, so here's all these different steps along the way that can help provide some informed. I'm not saying you need to do all of these things. Some things will be valuable for you and your team as you're trying to narrow in on that detail. If you don't have all the information, because we all have little bits of information, you can make more informed decisions by having this quantitative in addition to the qualitative. If we go off heuristics, this is how we've always done it. This is what we do. We're going to make some mistakes along the way. So you getting these inputs will help you make more informed decisions. I was working on a modeling project. I won't share too many of these right now, but we were doing it for an adaptive reuse project. We thought that if we did this one system, we put in heat pumps, that was going to be the ultimate way for the efficiency we're trying to achieve. What we learned is the shell upgrades, because there was a historic preservation impedance to this particular project. We put more money into the shell. We actually got better outcomes than some of the other heat pump technology. We wouldn't have known that had we done this kind of simulation on the building to kind of understand the dynamics of how these systems were working with one another. So that's just something where we thought one thing, because this has always been the case, but it informed us a different way by doing that model analysis.
And I'll just mention that Eric used that information to convince the funder to fund some different stuff.
So for mechanical engineers, we're looking at, if there's anyone in the field that are mechanical engineers, hopefully I'm not speaking on your behalf in two ways that you won't agree with, but we're often looking at those peak loads and how we're informing those design decisions. Modelers are looking at the whole park. Unfortunately, here in Portland, we now have two peak loads. We have both a winter and a summer peak load. So there's some other elements here in terms of our resiliency metrics that we might think about for load shifting and other types of stuff to address those. But generally speaking, in terms of the types of equipment that you're choosing, these will help inform, like, not oversizing the equipment, having cycling, creating a lower useful value of that life. So maybe equipment says 15 years, but if you're cycling regularly, that equipment could shorten in half. And then you're having the capital expenditure over the life. So expand that horizon of view, not just first cost, but the life that you're thinking about that building over the horizon, and then that will make better informed decisions as well. And here's a modeling decision, not by Earth Advantage. We were involved as charrette on a specific building that we helped certify. This project was looking at a couple different options to try to inform whether or not what was going to be the best choice for them from an economic basis to an efficiency basis, and then what happens if we add in a 264 kW system that brings down the EUIs. That also kind of transcended on a larger basis, looking at those, once again, looking at the different initiatives, the AIA, the zero, path to zero, where the baseline efficiencies of these buildings would be, and once again, applying that modeling to see what would happen if we were to use that. So modeling can be used to also size your equipment. But for load sizing for the common areas, the residential spaces, ensuring that those utilities are offset so that the burden that affordable housing has is a lot of the affordable, or I guess the houselessness or the homelessness occurs because utilities are too costly. People end up getting into a houseless situation because they couldn't afford those operating costs. So these are ways for us to analyze those types of things and provide better informed decisions. Also open up doors for funding and so forth. Earth Advantage, we're involved in lots of different things, from early designs and charrettes to design or reviewing types of drawings and showing where those pressure boundaries might exist, to doing verification during the construction process for certification compliance, and also publishing reports based on quantitative and qualitative analysis that are free and available to the market so that they can make those decisions better for themselves. Takeaways. Make certain that you get engaged with a green building professional and a modeler and a verifier earlier than later. Order does matter in terms of passive, active, and then renewables. Think about the expertise to avoid those pitfalls. Certifications are to be viewed as compasses, not to be considered checklists, so that you have those values. And quality assurance does matter. All right, here's my one more kind of focus on those. Engage energy modeling early and often, commit to green building certifications, and invest in trusted field verification. Here's some resources available. I'm on a technical committee for the Zero Coalition. We've published a lot of different resources that are once again available for statewide. These are systems for both new and existing buildings to help inform you on that process. And I have just run out of time, and I'm going to pass the mic to John to talk about quality assurance and verifications.
I might just, from my contractor perspective, put a plug for the real effectiveness of modeling, at least from my perspective, because, as we're working through, BE or target value design, trying to get to a budget, there's a lot of decisions that we're going to have to make to go along the way, and having that modeling to say, okay, if that's one of your stated goals, we know that's what we gotta, this building has to achieve the model or whatever we're saying. So I throw it at the table, well, what about, we could change the windows to this. We can take that information, we can verify it with the model. It's like, nope, we can't do that because then it'll blow the model. Or, yeah, actually we could, these windows will work and we can still achieve the goals. So it's a really great decision-making tool. Sorry, go ahead.
No problem. All right. So you'll start to hear a few themes here, communication, early planning, trying different ideas like that, and a lot of great stuff here. But with every great story, you got to have a little bit of tension and a villain. So, hi, I'm John DeLance. I'm with Evergreen, and I am a quality assurance provider for the PCEF multifamily and commercial programs. And I know what you're thinking. I saw everybody tense up a little bit when they heard third-party qualification there, and yeah, so we're seen as the villain, and we're the person that you don't answer our calls. You forget to invite us along on the site visits when you're going out to the project. You wait until the project is completely done and tenants are moving in before you call me and say, hey, we're ready to be checked out. And then when I come along and find something that's wrong, I become the bad guy. So moving forward with that, we'll talk a little bit about what quality assurance is and kind of figure out this process. And Oxford Dictionary says maintain blah, 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 especially means we don't care. This is what I'm focused on. Quality assurance is important. What I'm focusing on is confirming program requirements, verifying the property equipment, and promoting best practices. Bottom line, that's my goals with it. You know, there's a lot of things involved with that, but that's where my focus is. Nothing that I should be asking from you should ever be a surprise or something out of the ordinary. I'm not asking for a special report or anything like that. I'm asking for scopes of work. You should know your scope of work. Load calculation. Show me that the HVAC equipment that you're calling for is sized properly for the project that you're working on. Things like that. It should be things that you've already got in your folder or are planning for. And again, no surprises. Why does it matter? So obviously you want to get paid. So you want me to pass things. But it goes beyond that. We're looking to get the best performance, lowest operating costs, and most comfort for the tenants and occupants of the projects. U.S. Department of Energy did a study and found that over 70% of the HVAC installations had at least one fault. And when you added the ductwork into that, it became almost 100%. And those improper installations lead to increases in the operating costs, in the overall maintenance of the equipment, and the comfort. So it affects those things. You know, every error, every shortcut degrades the efficiency, performance, and satisfaction of the measure. So it's important to make sure that we're doing this right to get the most performance out of that equipment, make it as efficient as possible. So we can do it the hard way, or we can do it the easy way. I'm not here to trip you up. I'm not here to save the city money by failing you so they don't have to pay out. We want you to do good work. We want to give you that money and do these things. But it's difficult. It's mentioned a couple times here. If you're not planning ahead, it causes delays down the line, you know, surprises. We don't want the surprises. So communication is the key. We found that the earlier that I come into the process, the more we are able to solve those problems when they're just in the theoretical stage, rather than when things are already installed and you have to come back and replace things. So I'm here to help, and here's a list of the services, some of the things that we do above and beyond what you think of as quality assurance. That first one there, pre-application reviews, is something new that we've been working on, and it's been hugely successful. If you're considering going after a grant for one of your projects, you can schedule an appointment, and we'll come out and do a site walk with you and talk about what your goals are, what kinds of things you're looking to accomplish, and point out some things that you might not have thought of. So in terms of measures that qualify that you might not have been aware of, or maybe you're going in a direction that the funding won't cover. So making sure that it fits within those eligible measures. Beyond that, we do scope reviews, check the equipment, make sure that you're putting the right equipment in for the project. And beyond that, we can offer insights into some of the more gray areas, the tenant behaviors and things like that. What looks good on paper might not pan out when you put it into process. Fun fact, if you're going to be installing ductless heat pumps, don't rely on the little remotes to control those things. Mount a thermostat on the wall, put a cage around it, because within 2 weeks, they're all going to be lost or broken. And then you're going to be replacing them. So little things like that. Worked on a project downtown where they had to run a chase through the units, and it became pretty apparent that this was going to be something that people were going to try to minimize by decorating. So, you know, what are they going to do? They're going to put a nail through that wall, hang a picture, and now you've punctured the line sets that are running through that chase, and now you've got bigger problems. So what can you do to minimize those kinds of issues? In that case, they were looking at a metal sheet that would cover it. in order to prevent those fasteners from going through. In addition to that, user education, pointing out those things that the end user is going to need to know about, helping with that, and pointing out maintenance issues. It's not a set it and forget it kind of thing. There's ongoing maintenance with this equipment that the facility management or the tenants are going to have to take care of. Just some quick pictures from the field. A couple things. So here in the center, got an outdoor compressor unit with line set. The insulation on those was not fastened down. Over time, it's going to shrink and move and peel off, and you're going to lose efficiency on those heat pumps. In addition, you'll notice it's too short. It's not covering everything. So we're looking for things like that that are going to maximize that efficiency. What we're looking for is that to be extended all the way, secured down. That's not ideal insulation. If we're in early, we can make those recommendations for other things that might help with that. Over here, this apartment complex had older water heaters, and those drains there were connected to the TPR valves, the temperature relief valve, which only activate in a failure situation and would drain the tank. In this case, they upgraded the heat pump water heaters and connected the condensate drain to it. Heat pump water heaters produce condensate constantly, so the main level tenants were getting water continually flooding on their back patio and damaging property. So they had to come back and redo and basically extend those drains to move that away. These are things that we can help point out if we're involved in the early stages. There's one over here. I don't know if you can see it. If I can point this. So, got the compressor unit over here, right next to the front door. Line set goes right under the front door and around and up. Every single person who goes through that door every single time is going to kick that line set. You've got it running under the front window here, so kids are going to climb up on that and use it as a step to call in and see when it's time for dinner. If we were in early, a couple questions I would be asking is it possible to move that unit right over here instead? Another possibility would be, what about take it up and around the soffit to get it off the ground like that, so it's not vulnerable. In some cases, there isn't a good solution. We've had a couple where it wasn't ideal, but the only way you could get them in was to do that, but at least have that conversation on the early side, so it's not a problem. It's something you can work out. I had the opportunity to be brought into the OAC team, owner-operator contractor team, very early in a project that I was working on, and for the most part, I sit there quietly and just listen to what they're doing. But in a couple cases, they ran into some problems where the installation of the heat pumps was not going to be permitted by city requirements. So they were coming up with opportunities to work on that. And a couple times, they kind of steered off, so the solution was not covered under PCEF requirements. So I was able to steer them back before that conversation went too long, and they wasted a lot of time planning for something that wouldn't be acceptable. So bring us in early, communicate, we can help you. That's what we're here to do. So teamwork makes the dream work. Let's work together. Let's work towards doing the best work we can, providing that comfort for the tenants, and work as a team, not as, I'm not here to be your villain. So with that, I will pass it over. I think we're back to Q&A.
Yeah, thank you so much, John. John has been, there's one more slide that somehow didn't make it on here. John and Evergreen, both Evergreen and Earth Advantage are contractor quality assurance providers for PCEF, and they have been great partners in developing our approach to quality assurance. And I think that piece, what we've always said to them is, you're not here to fail projects, you're here to make projects work. Like, if it doesn't work and the project doesn't get done at the end of the day, it's kind of on you. So figure it out. And so one of the things that is standard in our quality assurance process is early scope review. So our quality assurance providers look at a scope before anyone breaks ground or PCEF pays out any dollars, and they're able to make these recommendations earlier. They're able to kind of be like, oh, if you're going to do this, think about this. Think about where your line sets are going to go, and getting them out on site is early is really, really helpful as well. So yeah, it seems simple, but somehow it doesn't happen. If the funders don't get really good visibility into what's happening in the projects, and maybe that's because there's a little bit of fear of like, oh, if they saw what was going on, they wouldn't give us the money. And then the quality assurance, like John was pointing out, is seen as a villain, that they're gonna come in and they're gonna fail a project and then you don't get funding. That is never gonna happen. And then that the modelers are kind of brought in after the design has already happened, just to make the math work. And so it just seems like there are reasons that our system has evolved the way it is, that have to do with people like trying to get units done. But if we kind of take a step back, we bring everyone together in the very beginning, bring even, Afton's talked about contractors coming in after architects are so far down the road, and then contractor looks at what the plan is and they're like, this isn't feasible. You didn't think about this, or it's going to be really, really expensive to do it this way. You should have thought about doing it this way instead. So if we were all at the table at the very beginning, I guess that's our big point is bring us all together. We can make really good buildings together. So, any questions for this illustrious panel with like a combination of, I think, 100 years of experience in affordable housing development? Yeah.
Thanks, Wendy. Question for you, Acton. We're on like 5 Walsh jobs right now. We work with Nick, Jay. You're enclosure team.
Okay.
Awesome. Great attention to detail to the envelopes. I'm really glad you talked about it. Have you guys ever done a study of like the value, like you spend more up front, but 10 years down the line there's enhanced durability? Have you guys ever done like an analysis of you spend this much, but you save this much, likely one window is going to fail and like blow? Something like that, like the cost analysis of your extra effort.
Yeah, we have, our Seattle team did that maybe 5-6 years ago, where we actually worked with a modeler and put in like energy costs. We worked with a third party to help us, because that's such a huge component for utility costs. And so that was more to get break even. And like we looked at exterior insulation as an example, like at what point is there a break even on that sort of life cycle analysis. I would say there hasn't been a huge need, or we thought it would be this great thing that everyone would want. It didn't end up panning out. I just think that there ends up being a lot of other funding. We're going to do with the funding, this. We're going to do what we can afford, and so we didn't get as much traction out of it. So we haven't kept our data up to date, as costs are constantly changing. But I think it's a really good, interesting point. There should be more investment in that.
Well, yeah, just great work. Awesome.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. I do none of it. It's all them.
I have a question, I think, for probably Evergreen and you, Wendy, on the quality assurance side of things and really compliance with funding sources. As an owner, you're potentially looking at a commissioning agent, third-party certification kind of reviewer, as well as ETO coming out and verifying the equipment. Is there a way as a funder you would accept commissioning reports or other things, or vice versa? Is Evergreen or other quality assurance entities able to provide kind of that whole suite of compliance? Just again, trying to make efficiencies and streamline that compliance process.
I think it's a great point. You have all these different funding sources we're also going to send John out to do a verification. So how could we, if, we're having these conversations right now, how can John and Eric kind of share information so we're not wasting resources? Yeah.
Kind of a similar question. If we're providing consulting, like green building consulting for a client that pursuing PCEF funds, do we de facto have to work with Evergreen and Earth Advantage? Like, could we provide that? It's like we're already doing it, we're already modeling, so why do we also have to work with someone else on that?
Well, I mean, I guess.
If we fit the scope.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what you're saying you as the modeler would be doing.
So like if an entity's already have their own private QA for their green building certification, and we approach to get PCEF funds, why do we also have another QA if we're all verifying the exact same thing?
Well, I mean, one of the important roles that I think that like Evergreen and Earth Advantage, when they're representing PCEF at the table, is they're making sure that the measures are eligible and that they're installed to PCEF specifications, and that is something that not all modelers will be expert at. But I think that what I want to see is Eric and John enabled to talk to each other, or you and John enabled to talk to each other, and a lot of times because your relationship as the modeler and certifier is with the developer, and John's relationship is with the funder, and then sometimes you two aren't enabled to talk to each other. And so I would really like to, whatever paper we have to sign so that you guys can collaborate, I'd really like to see that happen.
I'm working on a project right now where we have done a model and we have our own, our client has done it. And so when we're now working with PCEF's QAQC, they didn't redo the model. We shared the model with them and it was done to the standards. I don't know all the right terms, but it's the particular type of, model and rigor that they would expect. And so they didn't do a new one. And they were like, oh, great, I don't have to go do it. You've already done it and we'll use it. So I think there is efficiencies there and that they're not going to redo work that has already been done to sufficient standards.
Yeah, I think very interesting perspective, I think, from all four corners. I'm curious in Portland specific if there's like a North Star project or something where you're like, it actually fulfilled all four of these priorities that you can kind of use as like the template, or just if it's out there for Portland specific.
Any Walsh job.
I would agree.
And actually, I'll say that too. I've been on both ends of the spectrum as far as projects, and I've worked with Walsh's team, and just their focus on that keep it simple, straightforward, has been real easy to work with their team as far as making sure things get done. Communication, they're actually the example I used that I was brought in early on the OAC team, where I don't say a whole lot, but I've been there through the whole process. So I had great trust in them as a team to make good decisions from the very beginning. I've seen their process. I trust what they've decided. And it's not one of those things where they've kept me in the dark and they just said, well, this is what we went with. And now I have to find all of the justification for that. So yeah, with Walsh's teams, it's been a great relationship.
Eric, you probably have a few that, not Walsh necessarily, but like a few projects that you feel like have been exceptional. And
I do, but like there's a lot out there. There's a lot of teams out there, and it's hard to be, because there's a lot of different design and construction teams I see in the audience here. So I would say I would share that maybe in conversation, but I would be hesitant. Say every Earth Advantage project, but I would be hesitant to say like there's a couple out there, but I'd be cautious about saying one particular one here, which is because there's a lot of teams that have done really good work, and there's a lot of projects that have gotten kind of national recognition for the work that they've done, and you can see those recognitions in the DJC and the AIA and other things of that nature. But I guess I'm going to pause on calling out any specific project.
But I think what you can say is that every single project that would meet those standards have had the early collaboration, that everyone at the table, early
And the projects that didn't do that, it was a struggle for us to get through those projects, and we were just there was costly mistakes that we had to kind of resurrect. One of the things that when I first joined Earth Advantage, there was a project I was working on, I won't name the name of it, but they decided to go after 4 certifications: Earth Advantage, Enterprise Green Communities, Energy Star, and LEED. And they did that for funding purposes. And what we learned during that process, along the fact that it was a very difficult certification standard to pursue because it was effectively a Frankenstein, is we didn't get involved as early in the process of some of the requirements of that program. And so when they got to the stage of verification, there was some ad costs that ended up escalating the viability of performance of that building. And just being able to get through, we had to find $50,000, $100,000 of additional money just to be able to get the project through that compliance. And so that sense, that kind of was my first kind of foray into what we don't want to do and how we work through the process of getting involved early and often in projects in the future. So you learn as much from the mistakes as you learn from those really all-stars and those stars that you work on.
And I'll just say one more thing, Tim, and I'll get to your question. Walsh does great work. PCEF also has a very sincere interest in enabling new and emerging contractors to move into this space. And that is another great value that that new and emerging contractors can learn from John and from Eric when they're coming in about like, oh, how does this PCEF thing work? What are the things that I can do? And that's a really great role that John can play in like mentoring them and bringing them along and helping them to be able to get to the same results that we can get to.
This question's for Tanya. In the housing needs analysis, which is on my list of reading materials soon, is there consideration for preserving existing affordable housing or converting older buildings? Because we're seeing all across the state and all across the country more and more formerly HUD-funded projects where the affordability agreement is ending, selling and going market rate. So yes, we need a lot of new affordable housing, but converting existing housing costs less. So I just want to know if that was in the housing needs.
Yeah, absolutely. If you look at the housing production strategy, it is one of the actions, and we had a lot of discussions as we were drafting that strategy, that preservation was really, really important. You can't fill up the bathtub if the stopper's not, plugged, right? We have to preserve units that already exist in order to move that needle forward in any significant way or meaningful way. So that is called out in the housing production strategy. When you get in there, you'll see some actions that are related to that. Our last RFP for funding was focused on preservation. We have a specific strategic program partnership with PCEF for preservation units. So we are definitely tracking that and investing in that as well.
That's what I figured. I appreciate that because a lot of the housing that I just talked about was before the Oregon REACH code and energy code, and technically is a D- in school. It's minimum code for occupancy.
Yeah.
Fixing that produces a lot of energy savings as well as greenhouse gas reductions.
Absolutely.
State of Oregon has an interesting tool, I'm sure some have looked at it before, that is actually keeping track of the statewide housing stock and at like what is coming up to expire in the next 2 to 5 years, and it's a really interesting tool, and they call out specific projects where they are and to kind of see. I find it fun to play around with and see what's coming.
We've got 2 minutes. Any burning one more question?
I'll have to, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Towards PHB and the analysis of housing needs related to zoning code, is there any study about how dense development is kind of typically occurring? Even if it's zoned for a higher density, is it getting built at a density that Portland would like to see?
Yeah, I think, if you look into resources, PHB didn't do the housing needs analysis. The Portland Bureau of Sustainability led that effort, so they have more resources. But you're really kind of getting into that tension of like, even though it's zoned for a certain density and there's FAR bonuses and all of that, do you have the resources and able to realize that? Is it the appropriate location for that type of density in terms of the perception of the community and what they want? So we're going to be grappling with that for a while.
I'm just thinking anecdotally, I would imagine that you're underbuilding for the density that we have.
Absolutely.
I think of specific, I think of 3 or 4 projects I've worked on alone that we did not maximize density of the sites due to cost or neighborhood, or especially if our PSH, you can't build a PSH unit with 300 units. It doesn't work. But here you need
You
that.
don't want to.
Oh, yeah. No, we just say you can't do it. So there's a lot of different types of that.
I'm just curious at this point, given that there are a few projects that are going through PHB, kind of the moving down in funding, if a new project is interested in getting PCEF funding, is that effectively independent of PHB, or can you kind of help us demystify the relationship between these two entities? Yes. Yes.
It's a yes and, yeah.
We're working on this a lot, and a point of clarity is absolutely you can get PCEF funding without PHP funding, and we're going to make that even more obvious going forward. And there's going to be future solicitations that open up, and if you're only interested in PCEF funding, just because PHP is administering it, you'll still be able to come for PCEF funding if you're not asking.
Yeah. I mean, we'll always try to leverage other resources that we have available, but that will also be an option as well.
Thanks so much, folks.
Is that good or bad?
This is better than
It went down, peaked out.
yeah. This in the DoubleTree. This was 1,500 to 30. We had it at 3,000.